this is Lisa from Mobile Tech Review, and it is Smackdown time yet again. This time we're looking at the US version of the LG G3, an actual production shipping LG G3, unlike the Korean pre-release one we reviewed. And we have the Samsung Galaxy S5. I think these two are probably the most direct competitors, even more so than the Note 3 that we also did a Smackdown with against the LG G3. And we're going to compare them now. So here they are, the LG G3 here with its 5.5 inch, better than full HD display, and the Samsung Galaxy S5, the incumbent, with its full HD 5.1 inch display, so a 0.4 inches difference in screen size. Despite that, you can see that these two guys are not so different in size from each other. So LG did a miraculous job of making a compact phablet, shall we say. Anything that gets above 5.1 inches these days is still kind of pushing towards that combo of a phone and tablet, functionally speaking, but it's not really a huge phone. And that says a lot because Samsung themselves makes one of the smallest, thinnest, lightest of the big phones on the market with this 5.1 inch display. Before we get more into the design and ergonomics differences, I just want to show you the difference in the displays themselves. Super AMOLED here, really very beautiful, very bright. That's one thing Samsung has really overcome the brightness limitations of Super AMOLED, and it's a very bright, super saturated display. And once you get used to that kind of thing, it's kind of hard sometimes to go just to traditional IPS displays with their more muted or perhaps even natural colors, but still. It's also brighter. Even on maximum brightness, the Samsung is the brighter phone. So for those of you who like super bright phones, keep that in mind. Now the LG G3 is no dim phone. It has auto brightness settings and manual brightness settings, and you can go to 100% and have it be pretty bright, around 400 nits or so, but Samsung is still going to beat it in the brightness arena and for those really popping better than life colors that Super AMOLED gets you. That is in part really a matter of personal preference. So back to the design thing. Samsung here, they have the physical home button and capacitive keys on either side. LG instead goes with the on-screen buttons right here, and typical of LG, you can actually set the arrangement of these, which order you want them to be in. Nifty that. And it might look like metal to you, and LG's done a pretty good job of faking metal here, but they are both plastic phones. Both LG and Samsung are masters of plastic phones. Samsung perhaps more famously so because their phones really looked unabashedly plastic. LG at least tried to change that, and they said, hey, we know the LG G2, the one that came out before this, looked like a shiny plasticky mess, so let's do something about that. So it's available in your choice of white or kind of gray-black, and it's not so slippery, it doesn't look so cheesy, it doesn't get all fingerprint grimy. It's actually fairly surprisingly grippy, which is pretty cool. So in terms of design, I give them a thumbs up. It's a nice looking phone. It's a very modern looking phone. I would say it's a little HTC One M8 derivative generally in terms of the curved design and all that sort of thing, but still, good looking phone, easy to hold on to. I like the curve. I like that it thickens a bit here in the middle because it really is easy to hold. It's one of those phones that just feels nice. As long as you have big enough hands to hold it, which I happen to have, carrying this around just feels good. Samsung, on the other hand, with our friend the Samsung Galaxy S5, we have the faux metal trim on here. It's not a bad looking phone at all, but you know, it still says I'm plastic a bit more. And on the back, Samsung's new thing is this stippled finish. It's sort of like faux leather, you know, it feels kind of grippy, it feels kind of nice, and it is a bit of a thinner phone too. There's not so much of a thickening in the middle. The sides are straight enough that you can hold it in hand, and it's pretty comfortable too. I don't think it feels as nice in the hand as the LG, but it's an easy to grip, nice to hold onto kind of phone as well. And if we put them side by side so you can see the thickness here, not too much of a difference from the side view initially, and if we look here, you'll see that the LG does get thicker in the middle. Now in terms of pricing, both of these typically in the US are $199 on contract. Some carriers may be being a little bit more aggressive, like Verizon with their $99 special on the G3 at the moment. And on retail, typically the Samsung is about $30 to $80 more. It really depends on your carrier. So more of a difference off contract if you're buying it full retail because you're not up for a contract renewal than if you're buying it on contract. Internally, both of these guys, you're looking at the same guts. Quad-core Snapdragon 801 clocked at 2.5 gigahertz. This is currently the top-of-the-line CPU on the market for Android smartphones. 3 gigs of RAM on our US LG G3. I know some of you overseas in Europe might get the 2 gig version. Ours has 3 gigs of RAM and 32 gigs of storage inside. The Samsung Galaxy S5 has 2 gigs of RAM and has 16 gigs of internal storage. Both of these have micro SD card slots to augment storage. Great for putting your videos, your documents, all that sort of thing on. Samsung does hack Android, so you can put apps on SD card. That won't work with all applications, but there's a little something there. Both of these have the SD card slot under the removable backdoor. Both of these have removable backdoors and removable batteries. Somewhat higher capacity battery for the LG G3, but then again it is driving a bigger and higher resolution display, so it needs it. 2560 by 1440 the resolution on the LG G3. I think that's one of the things that a lot of people focus on. One of the exciting facts of the phone is that it's over 500 ppi pixel density. Samsung Galaxy S5 is the more average, shall we say, for a flagship smartphone. It's 1920 by 1080. Unless you're Superman, you probably won't notice the difference apparently on the screens of these two phones. They're both very nice, very sharp displays, lots of detail there. I will say that with the LG, even, well, something like the icons here, the icons look a little finer, a little more sharply rendered. If you're reading small text, if you read ebooks and you like to use small fonts so you can read as much on a page as you can before doing a page turn, the LG is going to win. If you're looking at 4K video, it's going to look a little bit sharper. Obviously not quite as bright. There we can see that difference again. So yes, it's a really neat selling feature, and I think it is a marketing point more than anything else, the extra pixels here. Generally speaking, it doesn't hold down performance. In benchmarks, they do about equally as well, but in some of the more demanding 3D games, the real hard ones, like Asphalt 8, you might notice a difference in frame rate where, because the LG G3 is pushing more pixels, you might not get quite the performance. It's still adequate, it can still do its job, but, well, there it is. In terms of viewing angles laterally, obviously they reflect like crazy, and the Samsung again wins a little bit there. IPS display on our LG Super AMOLED here. Now it looks worse on camera than it does in real life, and the LG is actually pretty easy to see off angle. You'll just see some dimming, you will not see any color shift. So how about cameras? 13 megapixel camera with optical image stabilization on the LG G3, and the interesting laser autofocus, so it really does make for quick focusing times. Really particularly helps in low light, and those of you who've used the Galaxy S5 might know what it's like in low light, where it says hold still, and you're really hoping you don't move your hand while it tries very hard to focus and make a clear shot, and you may or may not succeed at doing that. Anyway, here's the UI on the LG G3 camera. So we have our switching between camera and video modes. We have front and back cameras. We have our mode, and you can choose from panorama, dual, which is front and rear camera, magic focus, which is a kind of background deblurring feature, and auto mode. We have flash control over here, and we have some more settings. Resolution, HDR, auto mode, timer, grid, where you want to save it to. So that's what the UI is like there. It's not too busy, shall we say, with features there, but it gets the job done, and it does take very nice pictures and focus quickly as well. Now here's the Samsung Galaxy S5 camera UI. Menus are up here. You can see it periodically doing its autofocus thing, switching between video formats, shooting modes. Lots of modes here, and I think this is a fun way to do it too, where you can see an illustrated version of what it will do. So I kind of like this actually, this camera software here. If you want to go to even more settings, lots and lots of settings. So you shutterbugs who really like to play with your settings are going to enjoy this. Those of you who prefer the I just wanted to do a good job and take a picture will probably be happy with either camera or the LG even, because there's less things to actually have to think about there. But again, for features this is good, but no optical image stabilization on here. Not quite as good at low light photos. So you clubbers who like to take pictures at night, keep that in mind. Both of these can shoot full HD and 4K video as well, so you've got those bases covered too. And they both do a pretty good job. I think I prefer the Samsung's video a little bit, and the photos a little bit sharper. The LG's a little bit more aggressive with noise reduction, but it's not that hideous either. Really, they're two of the best camera phones on the market. Now when it comes to the OS and the user interface on here, we have Android 4.4 KitKat on both of these, so that's a good thing. That's currently the latest and greatest. Give a minor final dot release version there. And we have Samsung TouchWiz here, and on the LG we have LG's own UI, and they are awfully similar. Some people have said, well, that LG copy Samsung, and perhaps they do in some ways, but they have diverged away from the touch whizzy kind of look that they had. For example, the primary colors, which still obviously figure big on Samsung there, right down to their home screens, are gone. They're going for kind of, secondary colors, tertiary, browns, muted oranges, some purples, things like that. So it makes the UI look a little bit more grown up and less Hello Kitty than it used to be. They both do heavily skin Android. Just take a look at the way they treat applications. For starters, see, LG has their geometric, what they call icon treatment here. So we have circles, we have squares. They tend to leave the third-party icons alone, let them be themselves. So it's just for the built-in applications right there. And they both have multitasking, both of which you can achieve by just pressing and holding the back button, for example. And you can choose from a selection of applications right there that you want, including the web browser, email, Google Hangouts, Maps, YouTube Player, Chrome, Gmail, Gallery on this one. And here on the Samsung, press and hold the back button and you can bring up these applications. My Files, Music Player, Video Player, Chrome again, Gmail, all that sort of thing. So about the same idea, and they give you visual targets there where to drag. I think you can figure out for yourself where to drag, so that's not so necessary. But both of these do have multitasking, slightly different selection of applications, but both do about the same job there. Both of these have a sensor, so they can use the front camera to keep an eye on you and not turn the screen off while you're reading something on the screen as well. Call quality on both of these phones is very good. They both have 4G LTE, depending which carrier version you get. Of course, they'll have different bands that make sense for your particular carrier. So even footing, again, they both have Wi-Fi 802.11ac, Bluetooth 4.0, NFC, a GPS with GLONASS, 2-megapixel front-facing cameras, so real close there on the specs again. In terms of battery life, well, like I said, the LG has a bit bigger battery, but it has a bigger screen to drive and more pixels as well. So the Galaxy S5 actually has impressed me with its staying power, particularly when playing games. I admit it, I'm a little addicted to Real Racing 3 and to even Heyday, and that screen on time and when the processor is really working hard and the internet connection can really be draining, and the Samsung holds up quite well under that. The LG, I see more drain. I mean, and that is one of the most draining things you can do, playing a intensive online game or 3D game on the phone. But overall, for a mix of normal use and not being a gameaholic, the LG G3 does have a bit more staying power. We're talking about, a fifth of a day difference, though, an average use time, so not that much. Now, how about experientially? I've been using the Galaxy S5 as one of my main phones. Now, I do switch phones a lot, but I do have one or two that are my personal phones. The Galaxy S5 is one of my personal phones, and I recently switched over to the LG G3. So how has that done for me? I have to say, I really enjoyed the extra screen real estate. That 0.4 inches is really very nice on this phone, especially when watching videos, playing games, that sort of thing. So it's been quite pleasant. I like the feel of it in the hand a bit better. I think the look is a little bit nicer too. That's subjective. You might not agree with that. Other than that, really there hasn't been much of a difference. Both of these have pretty heavily skinned UIs. If you don't like that, you can use a third-party launcher on it. I don't find one particularly more wonderful than the other. LG might be a little bit less obtrusive. You don't get quite as many tooltips, that sort of thing there. But otherwise, yeah. Certainly the sharp screen on the LG is nice. I do read a lot of ebooks. I enjoy that a lot. I obviously spend a lot of time on the web, and sometimes I read long articles with tiny type, so that's been nice too. So as somebody who's recently switched over from the Galaxy S5 to the LG G3, I can tell you so far it's going pretty darn well for me. That said, whichever phone you pick, you're getting one of the best Android smartphones on the market. You really can't go wrong here. With the Samsung, it's the bright, vivid, Super AMOLED display. It's the pretty grippy and comfortable to hold phone. With the LG G3, it's the really high resolution, even bigger screen, the optical image stabilization, the laser focus for the camera that are really the big selling points there. And you get, in the US, more storage too, which is always nice. So that's the LG G3 versus the Samsung Galaxy S5. Generally speaking, around the same price on contract. Galaxy S5, generally speaking, a little bit more expensive off contract, full retail pricing, but a lot of similarities here, some important differences, and hopefully now that you've seen them, you can know which phone's right for you. I'm Lisa from Mobile Tech Review. Be sure to visit our website to read the full written reviews of each of these phones, watch our video reviews of these phones, and subscribe to our YouTube channel.